to do that. So look, welcome to the first in the autumn series of webinars focusing on Industry 5.0. Today's focus is going to be on IoT technologies and how they can improve resource and energy efficiency. And we're also going to talk about how to reduce carbon emissions. So our experts today are Joanne and Jackie from Kinsetsu. So we thought Jackie was going to arrive a little bit late because she always wants to make a dramatic entrance, but she got here on time, so that's perfect. So Jackie and Joanne started Kinsetsu a number of years ago, based in Belfast, focusing on IoT technologies, really to optimise asset management across sectors like healthcare and defence. And under their leadership, Kinsetsu has secured some really impressive contracts with the likes of the NHS and the Royal Navy, and really grown their reputations for delivering innovation in that sensor-based technology. So the guy, I've been very impressed with the guys' journey and what they're actually bringing to industry. We've also got Adrian joining us today, and Adrian's from AD Sustainability. I'm going to try this again. So he's a Chartered Environmentalist. Okay, so he's also an IEMA member, a lot of acronyms in there, so I'm doing my best. And he's going to share how he has guided organisations in measuring and reducing carbon emissions. So the format, the guys are going to do a bit of chat, show you a few things. We're going to do some Q&A throughout. So if you can drop any questions into the chat, we'll wrap those up at the end, and we can actually see what those questions are and get some good, insightful answers. But I'm going to start off with a question for Joanne. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Joanne, but I'm going to ask you this question. Many customers are currently deploying Industry 4.0. So why change to 5.0? Is this not bringing complexity and additional cost?
Great question, David, and one that we're asked many times. So as you said in our introductions, Kinsetsu, whenever we were formed 8 years ago, we focused on developing our own platform that's an IoT-based platform. So we've always been aligned to those Industry 4.0 pillars, whether that be big data, whether that be cybersecurity, whether it be systems integration, whether it's cloud, but actually really on that IoT space. But from inception also, we have worked with Strategic Investment Board and Innovate UK. And one of the changes in relation to Industry 4.0 to 5.0 is where you're looking at technology and it has to be human-centric. So it's all about your teams, how they can be empowered by technology and make best use of technology and to help them in their, I suppose, daily tasks. So we've always done that. So Kinsetsu focus on what we call human-centered design, and we put the output the customer needs in relation to their data and visualization at the center of everything we do, and technology then is effectively secondary. So that's one of the big changes, but we're already there. I think the second change is in relation to being sustainable in your practices, and I think that for all of us it's something that in our own practices here and how we engage with our customers and utilising IoT technology is something that we drive on every project, but actually working with our customers to help understand that and help measure that, to help improve that, and obviously then talking to Adrian about how that can be done is something that we're driven towards doing and supporting with our clients. And then thirdly, then the other key thing would be in relation to technology for good, circular economy, ensuring that you're able to drive forward in a positive and sustainable way and help support those people in society around you as well. So I think that for many people that are on this call, they're already on those journeys, because we do want technology to empower our people. It's not just for technology's sake, and we really need to bring people with us to adopt it and to drive forward and to get those efficiencies and those practices. Okay, hopefully that answered the question. So today, in relation to the agenda, we've got quite a lot of content to get through, but we're really going to look at Industry 4.0, why now, looking a little bit more around that human-centered design approach, and obviously from ourselves then looking at IoT and how it helps support resource and energy efficiency. We've been partnering with Adrian for a while, and I think there's one thing in measuring those aspects of your carbon emission, but actually how you then can work to reduce them. And then obviously then Adrian's going to demystify a little bit of scope 3 for us as well. So in relation to why now, I think that there has been for many years support from the government to enable manufacturing to utilise digital technologies to help improve in relation to their resource and energy efficiency. Kinsetsu has won an award with the Made Smarter programme, Made Smarter and Smart Manufacturing Data Hub. And that is to enable customers to de-risk and to take in technologies to understand if they're going to work in their manufacturing environment before they go to full production. So I suppose many years ago, whenever they started this innovation programme, they felt that there would be a 455 billion growth within UK manufacturing in the next decade. So I'm not sure that we've reached that target yet. But obviously it's a key thing in industry that people are driving towards, and they want to do that in a sustainable way. In relation to obviously new government just in, so Labour have announced a national wealth fund of 7.3 billion, whereby they are going to support public funding to private investment to really kickstart that economic growth and to de-risk that investment, but really focusing on, you know, green technologies and growth industries within manufacturing to enable UK manufacturing to be competitive at a global level. And also within that budget, you know, they're looking at smart ports, and they're also looking at gigafactories and things like that as well. And I think then finally, you know, why now and why look at this type of technology to help on that sustainability journey as well as driving, you know, production efficiencies, is that a report from McKinsey, you know, the proof is in the pudding. So they, from 28% of manufacturers who have started to measure their footprint, they've already seen a 15 to 20% reduction. So whenever you start to focus on that, then that's whenever you can really start to see those benefits. So no matter where we work, so David mentioned earlier, you know, we do work in defence, we do work in healthcare, but we've been working in the commercial media and the manufacturing space for over a year now. And it doesn't matter who we're talking to, all of those areas are having the same problems. No one has enough money, budgets are constrained, they need to prove return on investment and need to optimise those services. The other aspect is that we've got lots of people who are doing lots of tasks, and people are burdened sometimes with manual tasks that could be automated to help drive forward in that efficiency, because our resources are under pressure, and it's how we can enable them, and then back to that human-centric design. Many of the customers who are on this webinar today, and many people that we've engaged with over the last 12 months are managing complex environments, and they're managing it both at a local level, regional level, and sometimes at a global level, and they're managing that risk, and they're managing compliance and health and safety as well. And utilising some of this technology can help with that. I think overlaying everything, we need to move forward in our environmental understanding, our sustainability metrics, and understand how we can, you know, reduce our carbon footprint. And that's another layer of complexity for businesses and something else that people need to manage and monitor. So Industry 4.0 and bringing it back to our people, right, and enabling our teams and looking at that human-centered design approach. You know, we put that outcome of what is needed from data analytics and creating that mapping at the center of everything that we do. And we utilize various different types of sensor-based technologies, and some that we'll talk a little bit today and bring into context. But, you know, for us, understanding presence, understanding light, understanding particulate matter, understanding velocity of movement, understanding that the right thing is in the right place. So we use sensors to do that, and we bring that up into digital mapping for our customers to create a smart global facility. But then we can bring that in to help support your scope 3 emissions in relation to smart logistics. So being able to understand that you have got the right thing that's in dispatch, but also then tracking that to its end journey and understanding the carbon footprint and the emissions of those vehicles as well. And overlaying all of this then in that sustainable way. And, you know, you can really only improve if you can measure. And I think we've talked to some customers that measure air quality once a month, and some people that measure it once a year, but it does have an impact, particularly in harsh environments, when you're welding, when you're cutting, when you're painting, when you've got furnaces. So being able to look at understanding air quality, but being able to understand how much energy you're consuming in that part of that factory, in that assembly line, is something that we can help with. But I think that the thing that we've really engaged with many clients, because we are looking for some additional customers to come in as part of this lighthouse project, is that we want people who are thought leaders, who want to drive forward in that efficiency, but not just doing it, you know, for technology's sake, but they really want on to help look at that bottom line. And I think that, you know, we'll talk about some examples today, but that whole process of understanding, you know, being able to help improve takt time, cycle time within your facilities and help measure, you know, your carbon footprint to help inform those goals is something that we are doing, and we're really excited to drive forward and learn with our customers as well. So effectively in Kinsetsu, what we do, our name is Japanese for proximity, and everything that we do is that we utilize our platform and sensors to connect and track and understand critical assets and flows. And we do this and we visualize this really within a digital twin for our customers, creating that intelligent mapping layer and powerful insights to drive efficiency and reduce cost. And then really looking at how we can utilize sensors within that process to help inform and reduce your carbon emissions. So taking it back into you know, real world examples of where we've engaged with clients and where we've seen this technology and IoT adoption really help in parts of that process, and particularly focusing on manufacturing for this. So at that very, you know, start in relation to goods inwards, you know, inventory, stock check, a lot of our customers that we've engaged with are, you know, they have manual counts or they're using barcode technology and they're doing manual scanning, and that counting and picking can be prone to error. With IoT, we're able to connect to thousands of things per second effectively with some of this technology, ensuring we've got the right thing in the right place, but also providing global visibility to that. So not only to the people that are standing there, you know, in your picking bays, but actually in relation to people in procurement and other areas of the facility as well. And that really does help with improvement in speed and accuracy and visibility for that part of that process. Then whenever we move into the assembly line and visibility, you know, some people that we've spoken to have spot checks at 8 o'clock in the morning, midday, and then 3 p.m. because things will go wrong in those different parts of the assembly bays. Sometimes there might be something that's been picked incorrectly. There might just be something that's just missing. There might be a tool that's not available, or actually people, and that can lead to unplanned downtime. It can lead to idle time, idle in relation to your resources, but also idle in relation to your machine time, and then impacting that OEE metric that people would be keen to measure. And what we're finding is that with IoT, we're doing that spot checking, we're understanding automatically that things have moved into the right area, that you've got the right tooling in the right area, and also that it's safe to use. You know, has it been maintained? Has it been calibrated? So we're finding a lot of customers that we're engaging with have to ensure the calibration of those tools they're working with. So along the way, we're able to understand that and ensure that we're able to understand the anomaly and to help understand those blockages. And that's about improving that takt time and getting things through that assembly line as quickly as possible, and overlaying that with the air quality and your kilowatt hour consumption that'll help drive that life cycle analysis of your products is something that we're really interested in engaging with customers. So then whenever we're getting to the end part of production, and for customers it might be an hour, or for some customers it might be 2 days depending on their product. And Jackie and I started our career in Dell in manufacturing, who were one of the first companies in relation to lean and in relation to utilizing some of this IoT technology, and who were extremely efficient in that time to cash. So being able to understand that you've got the right things that are going to be you know, set for dispatch, instead of it being a manual check, that it could be automatically checked through an RFID gate, for example, giving automated verification of that workflow, and at the same time capturing the environmental status. So what was the kilowatt hour usage in relation to those products coming off the line at that point in time, and being able to understand that cycle, the quantity, to get that life cycle analysis in relation to your product carbon footprint. And I think for us, that is helping people keep cash for the business and not in stock in the business. So in our own business, we talk about time to cash, and for many of the customers that we engage with, it is a key metric for them. And for us overall, it's about helping improve that takt time, helping improve that efficiency, that productivity, helping empower your teams through this technology, because it's really important in relation to that adoption, and then overlaying that in relation to how best we can measure you know, some of that carbon impact as well.
Can I just cut in there and ask you a question about that? So you alluded to the fact that you worked in Dell, and we've obviously a shared history working on that let's say, the old classic IT environments. And those deployments could be complex. They could require a lot of user engagement. A lot of IT projects failed because they weren't adopted. This sounds complex to me. Okay, so how complex is it to get things started? Yeah, and what are the timelines? Is this sort of, let's plan now and we'll deploy this in 2 years' time? What's the adoption like? How have you guys solved that problem?
It's back to that human-centered design approach and about putting that outcome at the outset. I think for whenever we're looking at this particular engagement where we're a lighthouse and we're looking at a POC and we're looking at engaging with a customer, it's quite a defined aspect, and that we can get customers up and running in 2 weeks. So it is a very simple process once we engage and we understand what outcome they want to see. I think whenever we're talking about going into full production, if you've got the right stakeholders, if you've done the right show and tell, if you've got the people around the table that will make a difference to adoption, then we find that whenever it moves into production, we it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's definitely going to be, maybe 6 weeks. It could be up to 2 months, just depending on the API integration with your existing systems. But yes, there would be a staged, pragmatic approach to help drive that forward. And it really does come down to people, David, and the willingness to engage. So thanks for that, actually, because I think it's a good point. So just in relation to where we make the difference, I'm going to ask Jackie to talk about project number 1. So I'll hand over to yourself, Jackie, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. David. I thought this was a good example of how the oldest, most proven process can still be enhanced and improved with IoT. So the Royal Navy have used wooden pegboards to account for naval personnel on ships. That is a common approach right across many navies globally as well. About 85% of modern navies still use that approach. But what is interesting about it is the wooden pegboard was first devised during Horatio Nelson's time. So that approach is more than 200 years old. So it really is an immensely proven process. And it has worked very well. But the problem for the Royal Navy came when about 5 years ago, they brought their 2 new UK aircraft carriers online. And suddenly they had to deal with many more personnel than they'd ever had to deal with before. So 1,600 personnel can be accommodated. But actually, they quickly realized that only 70% of those arrive via gangways. The rest arrive via flight deck and boat deck. And they suddenly sounded the alarm about a risk to life when emergency muster drills took just under 4 hours. So they had underestimated the fact that how much time it would take to get from one end of the ship to the other and across 10 decks as well. Also, there are 3,000 compartments either work in or sleep in as well. So the task of accounting for personnel and keeping them safe became very important to address as well. And so today with our platform and using IoT technologies, emergency muster drills take just under 4 minutes for 96% of personnel, because the other 4% of personnel are the first responders responding to the breach or the fire or the flood or the engine problem. So that is a tremendously important example. You all probably have complex processes that are well proven as well, but IoT, there is still room to enhance and improve and give back time, and there's always room to improve safety as well. I'm going to hand back to Joanne.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, and I think that whenever we talk about complex environments and adoption, you probably don't get much more complex than that in relation to the aircraft carriers. So in relation to project number 2, this was a manufacturer in healthcare, and they needed product visibility in relation to goods inwards, but also in warehouse, and also from a decontamination perspective because of where this technology was then being provided to. So they needed instant visibility of understanding stock count, whenever things had moved through parts of their goods in through decon, and then obviously into dispatch, and then actually out into delivery as well. So it was using a blend of technologies, and they wanted immediate insight into that inventory, what was being used at a point in time, the product flow and the takt time to get that out to their end customer. So they had a return on investment in 12 months, and they had saving of 18 contract staff. So the amount of manual tasks that they were able to reduce meant that they weren't paying for additional contract staff to meet the customer SLAs. And I think that's a good point, I suppose, just on project number 3, whereby this was one that's actually in transit at the minute. So we have an award with Digital Catapult in London that are part of the Made Smarter Innovation team, looking not only at, you know, green manufacturing and production efficiency, but understanding environmental aspects such as temperature and humidity. So this is actually with a concrete manufacturer, and concrete are the bad boys in relation to sustainability because of how much energy, you know, and what they use in relation to heating and water for their product. So being able to understand environmental data, to be able to understand temperature, humidity, outside ambient temperature, and blend all of that. The company already, you know, do measure their kilowatt hours, and being able to look at that and blend that data to understand life cycle analysis and traceability to help improve the resource efficiency and energy efficiency was really important. And like many customers that we've spoken to, if there is idle time and you're not able to get something through on time, and you have to then bring staff back in to finish a particular workload to hit an SLA, you know, you have a cost associated there, but you also are turning the lights on, turning the machines on, and you're doing just more in relation to energy consumption. And I think whereby if we can understand the anomaly and the blockages for our customers, we're able to help reduce that effectively. Just before I hand over to Adrian, I just want to finish on this visual slide. So this is actually in relation to some of the environmental sensors that we have. So what we're able to do with many different metrics, but understanding CO2, understanding light, understanding humidity, understanding sound actually is an important one for some of our customers, temperature and total volatile organic compounds as well, and understanding particulate matter. So understanding such as, you know, PM 2.5 or 10. And obviously this is in our own environment that I just wanted to show you today. So we don't have too many things that are outside of a range that should be a problem. But I think for some customers whereby we've seen some data and they do have, you know, paint, they've got soldering dust, they've got furnaces, you know, there are challenges with some of that particulate matter, and being able to manage and monitor that and bringing that back into health and safety of your teams then is quite important as well. So I'll hand over to Adrian.
Thanks very much, Joanne. Hi, everybody, and thanks to David for the introductions. So in terms of, as we said at the start, what I'm going to go through this morning is a bit of a whistle-stop tour on all things carbon planning. So we're going to be looking at, obviously, an introduction to carbon management in terms of emission scopes, examples of those emission scopes, etc. Going to be looking at tips and sort of pointers for organisations, particularly manufacturing organisations, to reduce their emissions, and predominantly in and around the energy and water side. And then we're going to look at the sort of wider beast of the Scope 3 emission sources, which is getting very popular at the minute. So in terms of the challenges that we're seeing, so we are on various advisory frameworks, one of which being the Invest in Energy and Resource Efficiency Framework. So we go out to a lot of SME businesses, including a lot of manufacturing organisations, in and around energy and carbon, doing energy and carbon assessments, renewable technology assessments, and wider sustainability reporting, which encompasses the Scope 3 side of things as well. And the main things we're seeing is, for a lot of businesses not even started the journey, they really don't know where to start, and they see it as being very complex and too complex for them to even consider it. And then another challenge for us is the data availability side of thing and the collation of that data, and then just advising the companies that we're going into just where you would get it from, and it's largely from obviously invoices, etc., or any existing sort of spreadsheets that might be being kept as part of an ISO system, for example. There's a lot of balance and competing priorities, obviously, within businesses as well. Some people don't even know where to start again in terms of identifying opportunities, and where they do identify those opportunities, how they actually plan and how to implement those reduction activities and opportunities. Scope 3 emissions is another challenge for a lot of organisations who are being asked questions about, you know, what are you doing to reduce your Scope 3 emissions? And I mean, the first question we would typically get is we don't even know what Scope 3 emissions are in the first place. And then finally, one that's getting very popular is how to respond to customer queries and customer tender opportunities as well.
Yeah, so can I just jump in there? I don't want to single Joanne for asking her all the hard questions, but what sort of carbon-related questions are you seeing larger organisations asking SMEs, small to medium, in terms of them as suppliers to them? Is there any governance or any challenges that they're getting around carbon-related questions?
Yes, David, thanks for that. Yeah, there definitely is. As I said, this is becoming more popular in terms of what we provide to a lot of our clients, and it's mainly twofold. So if you split it between current customers and potential new customers, so if you look at it from current customer side of things,
Yeah.
A lot of customers and larger customers who need to get the information basically from their supply chain. So if you're like a tier 1 supplier into large customers, you're probably starting to get questions about, do you measure your carbon emissions? What are they? And what are you doing to reduce those emissions? So as I say, we're seeing that more and more. Also from a tender opportunity, so a new business opportunity as well. So, you know, again, a lot of tender specifications now have built-in questions on around just what I've said about carbon emissions, etc. And some of them are actually being apportioned onto scoring sort of regimes as well. A good example of that is a manufacturing company we're working with in Uri, and they're supplying into the government in the south.
Okay.
And the particular department has actually implemented what's called a CO2 performance ladder, which is originated out of, I think it's the Netherlands. And they are now stipulating that you must implement a carbon management system to be part of this the framework they're going for. And what they're doing is you have to reach a certain range. So if you reach a certain range, you will get a certain percentage discount, notional discount during the evaluation phase for your submitted costs. So it's a massive step change. And you know, they have came to us saying, look, we really need to get this tender. We need your help. So that's the sort of examples, David, that we are seeing.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
sure.
yeah, and I mean, what I would say is if it's not at your door currently, it's coming if you're a relatively large manufacturing organization or even a smaller one as well, because the larger SMEs then might cascade that on down to the smaller manufacturers as well. So it just works through the tier chain.
Sure. Thanks for that.
No problem. So in terms of drivers, main drivers, so the top one there is the customers, which is becoming more and more. I suppose traditionally it was around business efficiency and getting your costs down. Obviously cost and efficiency is still very, very important. As a consequence of obviously driving down consumption and carbon, you're reducing your environmental impact. And there also make compliance elements there, particularly for the larger SMEs in terms of carbon reporting requirements. Some of these may have already seen this, but this is the sort of image that's come out of what's called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is effectively the Bible for carbon accounting, which is the sort of international best practice for accounting for carbon emissions. So you basically have 3 scope emissions. You have scope 1, which is basically any sort of fuel you use within your company facilities, any fuel used in company-owned vehicles as well. It also includes the likes of any air conditioning, refrigerant top-ups, that sort of thing, as well as the scope 1. Scope 2 is largely in and around sort of grid electricity supply, but it can also be any purchased steam, heating or cooling that you also do as well, or you also have as well. And then scope 3 is effectively the large beast of anything else, and it can include transportation of goods and services. So from an upstream perspective, that's the raw materials coming into the business or into your process, as well as your finished goods and products as well. There's also elements there in terms of business travel, waste generated, water used, etc. So as I said, on the right there, you can see the greatest impact by your business is likely to be from scope 3 emissions purely because of the different areas there that's in that diagram. And they're also typically, most of them are the hardest to accurately quantify. There are some of those that are quite relatively easy to do in terms of waste, in terms of getting that from waste invoices, etc., water consumption through water bills, etc. But a lot of the other ones are tricky enough in terms of pulling all the data together. So typically you would have over 70% of an organization's entire carbon footprint being related to your scope 3 emissions. And you're typically seeing that as being higher, can be 80-90%. So in summary, scope 1 and 2 is energy related emissions. Scope 3 is basically everything else. And then all together is called your value chain emissions. So in terms of examples of the different scope sources, you've got obviously natural gas, LPG from a heating perspective, kerosene, diesel, petrol consumed in company-owned fleet. And then you've, as I said before, the refrigerant side of things on air conditioning units, chillers, that sort of thing. Scope 2 is largely on the grid electricity, with scope 3 being waste generated, water consumption, and then your key raw materials use as well. So if it's steel you're using, wood, paper, cardboard, etc., plastics, both on your process, but also in terms of your final product packaging. And then the transportation side is air, road, boat, etc. for supplies in and as well as product out. Some sort of tips and pointers in terms of what we do when we go in and look at sort of processes for organizations. We identify opportunities. So carbon emissions hierarchy, this is like any other hierarchy of control where you go from the top, and the least preferable is the bottom one there as the triangle and gets to the point. So the first thing you want to do obviously is you want to eliminate. So can you eliminate being the energy and the resource being used in the first instance? So can you design it out as the optimum one? So for example, if you have a product which uses electricity, can you design your product to be as efficient as possible? So over the lifetime of that product, you're not using as much energy. And the second phase there is the reduce side of things, so reduce through efficiency. So if you look at that in terms of a manufacturing process, can you reduce idle time, etc., what Joanne mentioned earlier on, but it's also about upgrading pumps, meters, improving controls, etc. Third one there is substitute. So can you substitute, for example, your fuel source to a less carbon intensive one? And then least preferable is your offsetting side of things. So the offsetting side of things is getting a bit of a hard ride at the minute in terms of the voluntary market in particular. And offsetting has its place without a doubt. And what we have seen, for example, is some organisations are just paying, say, for example, £10,000 to cover all the carbon emissions without doing anything to try and reduce it. And that's very much a no-no. And particularly when you get the things of greenwashing directives, etc., coming from the EU, which will eventually hit the UK. Organisations need to be very, very careful about that. So in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of avoiding and reducing sort of consumption emissions, monitoring and targeting is very key, and it's obviously a key enabling measure, and that's why we're here today, basically talking about improving sort of the capability and the granularity of data to allow us to do this. Awareness, switch off messaging and training for key staff is another very important area, relatively low cost area as well. So can you look at driver training, to get you to ultimately, improve the way sort of company-owned vehicles are being driven to reduce or improve fuel efficiency, should I say. Improve fuel efficiency, reduces fuel use, reduces the associated carbon emissions. Machine or operator training, so if you have operators on particularly large pieces of kit who would be large energy users, can you train them to use that machine or that equipment as optimally as possible? Upgrading older systems with more efficiency and controls is another way. Can you upgrade your boilers to newer boilers, which are more efficient? New pumps, motors, combined heat power units, and decarbonising fleet through electric hybrid. There's also likes of HVO, hydrogen, etc. as well. Is there options to do that? Can you introduce variable speed drive controls to motors, pumps, fans, etc., which optimise consumption for the job at hand? So it basically tweaks the amount of output you need for the demand or the load that it's supplying. And then sensor technology, as Joanne's already touched on, in terms of temperature, CO2. You've also the PIR and daylight, which is a common sensor control in terms of lighting. And then the last one there is correct or optimally sized equipment for the job on hand. For example, are you using the right size of van for delivering products, etc.? So if you use an oversized van, you're going to be using more fuel, etc. And then optimizing consumption again, so introducing an energy audit program, which is again a relatively low cost and typically very effective as well, and particularly in and around the out of hours audit side of things. So can you look for equipment, lighting or heating being left on, looking for compressed air leaks, looking for passing valves and pre-treatment lines from a water perspective. So if you have a passing valve, basically, you're going to be continually consuming water and being charged accordingly. Looking at settings and equipment and systems as well. Temperature settings for rooms, aircon, so make sure you've got the optimum temperature there so you're not overusing energy. Compressed air operating pressures, so if you have your compressed air system operating at a higher bar level than you actually need, can you ramp that back? And that will obviously save you on the energy side. Program running times too long, for example, morning start up and evening switch off, so machines or heating, for example, can you optimize those to reduce your consumption? And then in terms of replacing alternative energy sources from a renewables perspective, can you look at solar PV? Can you look at solar PV plus battery, wind, biomass, or typically common ones? Alternative low carbon systems would then be combined heat power, as I touched on before, and then the heat pump side in terms of air source or ground source. And then renewable energy supplies again. Can you switch your current grid electricity supply to go to 100% renewable electricity supply? There are suppliers out there who do that. Now there is a bit of a premium of between a pence and 2 pence, typically per kilowatt hour. Or can you go with formal power purchase agreements? Can you replace with less carbon intensive fuels? Can you look at, if you have kerosene, can you replace that with LPG or natural gas? From an LPG natural gas, can you go to bio LPG, which is much lower carbon? Can you go to HVO versus diesel in your fleet? And then the decarbonisation of the fleet in terms of electric, hybrid, etc. So the monitoring target, as I said, is very, very important. And one of the main reasons why we're here today is typically what you would receive is an energy and water bill. It's either monthly, quarterly, or 6 monthly, depending on how high you are in terms of users. More granular data, for example, half-hourly through smart meter installation allows consumption profiling to complete it And it basically means you can be more proactive in your energy monitoring. As a minimum, what we typically recommend clients is to install half-hourly data for main and incoming supplies on your electricity supply, natural gas, and mains water if you're a high enough consumer. Ideally, you would like to go that step further, if possible, to go for targeted sub-metering then, in terms of your compressors, boilers, large pumps, motors, fans, air handling units, combined heat power plants, pre-treatment lines, particularly on the water side. And then you can actually zone areas as well, potentially, in terms of warehouse production lines, office areas, so you can delve into how much energy is being used in those respective areas. So smart meters, so once installed, more granular data becomes available, as I've said, where you can then really delve in and look at consumption trends and profiles, out of hours base loads. So if you do the out of hours base loads and it is higher than you think it might be, you know, is there items being left on, and it goes back to the out of hours surveys and audits. So is there compressors, pumps, motors, air handlers running when they shouldn't be, boilers are operating, heating and lighting on, or there's water being consumed. So is there a water pipe work leak, or are there passing valves, as I've mentioned before? Without this granular data, you miss opportunities to identify issues quicker and rectify them, obviously. So you'll be in a much better place to be proactive and reduce any waste of energy and associated emissions, as well as costs, obviously. A couple of slides now on just typically what you would see in terms of a half-hourly profile. So these are typically what you would kind of see with the solutions that would be coming out of this potential lighthouse project, which Joanne's going to talk on later on. So you see the typical sort of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday layout there. So you're seeing that, you know, obviously your base load is your sort of dark orange there. So what you're seeing at the weekend there, so if we assume at the weekend there's nobody there, you have a base load there of roughly 50%. So, I mean, my question there would be, if it's like an office environment or whatever it is, that base load seems very high. And that's where you start looking at your out of hours energy audits to see what's been left on, and ultimately what you're trying to do is to get that base load down. Just another way of presenting it, if you have the sub-metering side of things, so you can present it and you can see very, very easily with a visual, you know, what's using the biggest, and obviously what you want to do is concentrate in on those big loads. This slide is just basically on carbon reduction planning, and this is actually taken from the ISO 50001 energy management system standard, and it's just a typical plan, do, check, act cycle. So you have obviously your high level policy, the planning side of things is your baseline reviews, knowing where your energy is, identifying opportunities, and then implementing all those opportunities and controls. The monitoring and measurement is obviously key, and this is where Kinsetsu can come in and help you with that on the energy side. And ultimately what it's all about is continuous improvement and performance by reducing your energy, carbon and costs. This one's about scope 3, which is just the one slide on it, but basically we've talked a lot about the energy side of things with a bit of talk about water, but the two circular areas there is sort of reducing waste and improving recycling. So obviously if you reduce waste, you don't have to handle it in the first place, and you don't have to report it from a carbon perspective, obviously. Sustainable sourcing is basically in and around sustainable procurement, green procurement. So can you buy components? Can you buy packaging, which has a lower environmental impact or a lower carbon impact? That will ultimately reduce your scope 3 carbon emissions. The water conservation we talked about is obviously installing water efficient fixtures and controls and reducing consumption through leak minimization. And circular economy and old money is basically sustainable procurement, waste management, and resource efficiency all rolled up to one. And that's about keeping products within what's called the value chain for longer. So can you design it for repairability, or can you design it that it has separate components that are easily replaced? So to finish for me, just a bit of a summary. So energy resource efficiency is realised through optimizing manufacturing processes. So as mentioned earlier, reducing tax cycle times, minimizing idling times, etc., will obviously improve your production rate. So you will get more product through for the same amount of energy which you may have been using at the start of the journey. So it's obviously you're using that energy more efficiently. Obviously, obvious enough is get senior management buy-in, you know, to make sure everyone's sourced. It helps move it along the way. Review your processes and get your good data and analyze with the more granular data, the better, which obviously comes from your smart metering and your half-hourly profiling. Focus on emission sources where data is readily available and the resources there to make improvements. So if you're early on in your journey, don't think you're going to do it all at once. Focus in on your low-hanging fruit, and you'll get that from your initial evaluation and your baseline reviews. And keep it simple initially, which sort of ties in. Don't overcomplicate. Customer requests and tenders, assess what's being asked carefully. It's a bit like an exam question. Read the question, and don't overcommit.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. And I'm just conscious of time, so we're not going to go into too much detail here, but I think really for us, it's all about the data and the visualization of what's important. And back to managing the anomaly, just here as that's showing you here on the left-hand side, whenever we would notice that actually we had a massive power spike at a weekend. And we found out actually that someone was coming in and utilising something they shouldn't be in relation to our electric car chargers, which are now locked down. So you can find out these things really quickly whenever you're looking at the data. I just want to finish quickly, and obviously anybody can ask us to, for further information at the end of the call. But we've a number of customers already aligned. We were originally going to take in 8 innovative clients to this program to be part of this lighthouse cohort. We're already up at 7, so we're going to extend that out to 12. And effectively, this is where SME manufacturers can adopt technology that is supported by the Made Smarter and the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub. So instead of something costing just over 37k, it costs 5k to take in this technology for location-based understanding, and then for site usage in relation to an energy sensor, and then also in relation to an environmental sensor, which will understand your particulate matter, your temperature, your TVOC, your light levels, and other things that Adrian has been talking about as well. So that is pretty much it. I think I just want to finish on saying that obviously this is a series of webinars. Our webinar number 2 is in relation to looking a little bit more at the data and the platform, but really then looking at that digital product passport, where we can help support those customers who are looking at this data to look at legislation, to be ahead of that competition and understanding the life cycle analysis of the items that they're producing and being able to capture that through the platform. And we're going to have GS1 as a speaker, and Kinsetsu are a GS1 certified partner. And I think they're going to be fundamental in this change as it moves forward in this legislation. So I will stop talking now and hand over for any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joanne and Adrian. That's a lot of information. I think you're going to make the webinar available afterwards for anybody who wants to pick it up. We have a couple of questions, Joanne. So one specifically for you. What type of technology would be installed to track, it says R sheet metal and plastics products? That's from Alex. So can you give us an indication of what sort of technology would in place to track, and specifically sheet metal and the plastics product space?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question. So we're already working with a customer in that space, and we're utilizing what we would call RFID technology, and we would talk about all metal technology because there are complexities around that. But our guys are Wikipedia's on that sensor technology, so we will utilize the right type of RFID tag to associate one to metal that works there, and then obviously a separate one that would work on the plastic. The other thing that we're doing with customers is then utilizing BLE technology to track the containers of which they're in, the stillages and things like that as well. So we're able to blend that. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
And there was a second part of the question, which is, does your platform integrate with ERP systems?
Yes, so at nearly every project that we've worked on, this is not a standalone. This is it's an interoperable platform. It's a very secure platform, but we've got an API library. We're integrating effectively with many ERP systems, financial systems, asset management systems as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And then one for Adrian then. So within their operation, use natural gas and water. Do you have the sensors that can measure these sources?
Yes, thanks, David. Yes, absolutely. Yes, the natural gas and water sensors are also available, which will allow you to get, as I kept talking about, the granular data and how important it is. So that can also be linked to any system that that comes out through Kinsetsu. There's also other sensors in terms of level controls on tanks. So if you operate kerosene, for example, in terms of heating systems, you can have a level control which actually monitors, what obviously the level drops, and if you measure that over a month, you can convert that into what liters you're consuming. And again, in the background, you can also work out the associated carbon emissions with that as well.
Perfect. This is from an anonymous, so what I'll ask you anyway, in relation to our wastage, particularly in the scope 3 emissions, can you help with that?
Absolutely. And in terms of scope 3, then there's also devices in terms of weighing devices and things that can be integrated into the system as well, in terms of weighing what waste is being generated. And again, as I said, in terms of the kerosene side of things, you can utilize a carbon factor of that, where you will largely get instantaneous associated carbon emissions from that as well. So absolutely, and waste is one of the, as I said, one of the scope 3 sources, which is readily available sort of data. But if you can put it on a platform, you're getting it more instantaneous.
I think some of the customers where we've seen that, they're measuring automated through a scale at the end of a line, you know, at the end of a process. And then we're also seeing it in relation to bin levels, you know, where we've done that before, where you're understanding then in relation to a sensor how full that bin is effectively then as well.
Very
And
good.
maybe just, if I just add there as well, we can also do it for swarth containers as well, for anybody that's cutting steel as well.
You've covered all the bases, guys. I mean, there's a lot of information there, so I learned a lot from today's session, so thanks for sharing. It is good there's going to be a series. It sounds like there's more to talk about for sure. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. My best advice would be contact the guys. They're really easy to speak to. They know their stuff, and that's how good things happen, good conversations. So my advice would be to reach out. If you're not sure, maybe you're a bit shy about asking a question, reach out to the guys, have a conversation, and that's where the magic happens. So thanks for anything else finally, guys, or we're all good?
All good.
All good. Okay. Thanks very much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next session.
Guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.